President Joe Biden determined to stay in the race. Federal Liberal ministers of Canada with Trudeau. Hurricane Beryl devastation in Jamaica. Now here this 6-day working week in Greece. Good morning. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am thankful to all news resources and all my team. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Canadian and Australian channels and AP, AFP and Reuters news agencies. Now the headlines. Debate fallout for Mr. Biden. United Kingdom elections. Israel killed senior Hezbollah commander in Lebanon. Tension high on the border. Israel seized 5 square mile land in West Bank. Abortion rights in Arizona and Nebraska. Healthcare discrimination and gender identity. Corruption case of senator. Leaders of China and Russia met in Kazakhstan. Russian strike killed 5 people in Ukraine. On Wall Street, Dow Jones Industrial went down, S&P 500 and Nasdaq went up. Like father, like son. French Prime Minister appeal. Now the news challenge.
On this Wednesday night, U.S. President Joe Biden says he's not leaving.
He's moving forward as being president. He's moving forward with his campaign.
How he's trying to regain voter confidence and who might replace him if he does go. Federal Liberal cabinet ministers standing by their leader.
The Prime Minister has my full confidence.
What other caucus members are asking Justin Trudeau to do. Jamaica's state of emergency as Hurricane Beryl hits. Why some people are insisting on staying. And an unorthodox approach to work in Greece.
It's absolutely moving in the wrong direction.
Why it's introducing a 6-day working week.
Global National with Donna Freezing.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The American president appears to be standing firm in the face of speculation swirling about his future. Joe Biden told his campaign staff today he is in the race to the end, and the White House press secretary said he is absolutely not withdrawing from the November presidential election. His challenge is to try to restore confidence in his abilities after his faltering performance in last week's debate against former President Donald Trump. Even Biden now admits he didn't have a great night, and polls are emerging showing his support is slipping. Jackson Prosco has our top story tonight.
There are more signs of a campaign and a presidency in crisis. Donna?
All right, Jackson in Washington, thank you. Canada's Prime Minister is facing pressure too, not because of his age or abilities, but because of his faltering popularity. That recent Toronto by-election defeat in what was a safe Liberal riding stunned many. Today, for the first time since that loss, Justin Trudeau talked about it publicly. He said he is engaged in important conversations over the future of the Liberal Party. Mackenzie Gray on the challenge Trudeau faces, keeping his team behind him.
1 week later, the Prime Minister still repeating the same lies that led to...
All right, Mackenzie in Ottawa, thank you. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators have removed their encampment at the University of Toronto. They faced a court-imposed deadline of 6 o'clock today to clear out or risk getting arrested. They say they're leaving on their own terms, but will keep fighting for their demands, including divestment. Jeff Semple is at the U of T, where a new crowd has now gathered. Jeff.
Hi, Donna. Yeah, a couple hundred protesters have gathered here on campus.
First Toronto tonight, thanks. Canada has a new head of the armed forces, as Global News reported last week. Lieutenant General Jenny Carignan is the first woman to be named Chief of the Defense Staff. She is a 38-year veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces and has served in Syria, Afghanistan, and Bosnia. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made it official today.
Making sure that we have the right person to lead our armed forces in this pivotal time was something that I think Canadians appropriately felt that we needed to take seriously, which we did.
Carignan is the head of professional conduct and culture at the forces, a position created to deal with the military sexual misconduct crisis. She will be promoted to general and start her new job July 18th, replacing General Wayne Eyre, who is retiring. In Nova Scotia, that boil water advisory affecting more than 200,000 people in or near Halifax has now been lifted. All tap water is now safe to drink. Residents are being told to flush any appliances that store water for 10 minutes and to dispose of ice. Halifax Water issued the advisory Monday evening after a power failure at a major water treatment plant that led to a limited amount of unchlorinated water entering the system. In Saskatchewan, 2 men who died trying to save a family who fell through the ice are being honored posthumously with a Carnegie Medal for heroism. Cousins Christopher and Joseph Nowkoski ran onto the ice on Humboldt Lake last November after 7-year-old Ava and 6-year-old Evelyn had fallen through. They were nearly 100 meters from shore. The men, along with the girl's mother, plunged into the icy water. Evelyn and her mother survived the ordeal. Ava and the 2 men did not. The Carnegie Medal, one of the highest civilian honors in North America, is awarded to those who risk life and limb to save others. The cousins were among 18 people awarded the medal this year. In California, crews are battling an uncontrolled wildfire north of Sacramento. More than 25,000 people have had to flee their homes. The fire broke out yesterday. It's already grown to more than 1,400 hectares. It is hot, dry, and windy in Northern California. Temperatures are forecast to reach 43 degrees Celsius. Hurricane Beryl is now bearing down on Jamaica. It didn't take a direct hit, but the Category 4 storm is raging just south of the island, packing 233 km/h winds and creating a dangerous storm surge. Beryl has already devastated smaller islands in the eastern Caribbean, killing at least 7 people. Dan Spector is tracking developments for us tonight.
Dark clouds, pounding rains, and powerful winds descend on Jamaica as Hurricane Beryl brushes the news. Montreal.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved a new Alzheimer's treatment that could modestly slow cognitive decline in the initial stages of the disease. After months of delays, drug maker Eli Lilly has been given the green light to sell what will be the second drug of its kind. The brand name is Kisunla. It doesn't halt Alzheimer's, but it has been shown to slow the progression by several months. Health Canada says the drug is under review for use in this country. Eli Lilly Canada says it expects a decision by early 2025. It is election eve in the UK. Coming up, a look at Keir Starmer, the Labour leader widely expected to be the next British Prime Minister. At least 5 people have reportedly been killed by a Russian drone and missile strike on the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. Social media videos show the moment a massive explosion rocked that city. Locals say more than 50 people were also injured in the blast, which damaged shops, schools, and hospitals. In the eastern city of Kharkiv, Russian strikes are said to have killed at least 1 person and injured 14 others. Tomorrow could be a historic in the UK. Voters are going to the polls in a national election, and it could be a game changer. The opinion polls make grim reading for Tory leader Rishi Sunak, who is facing a likely wipeout. The man who appears set to become Prime Minister is Labour leader Keir Starmer, a former high-profile human rights lawyer. Redmond Shannon takes a closer look at the man expected to take power tomorrow.
Most British politicians are eager to play up how much they use London.
Break it down ahead. Meet Canada's first ever Olympic breaker. Former Toronto Raptor Jonte Porter will face criminal charges related to a suspected sports betting scandal that got him banned for life from the NBA. U.S. federal prosecutors filed court papers yesterday indicating they intend to charge Porter for his role in the alleged operation. Last month, 4 men were charged with conspiracy to defraud a sports betting company. Porter was banned from the NBA in April for violating the league's gambling rules. A Vancouver man could elevate Canada's medal count at the Olympics this summer by competing in a brand new event. Vancouver's Philip Kim is a world champion in breaking, the Olympic term for breakdancing. He'll represent Canada in Paris as breaking makes its games debut. Kim, known as Phil Wizard in breaking circles, was crowned world champion in 2022, and he just won gold at the Pan Am Games last fall. Get to work next. Could other countries soon follow Greece's 6-day work week? While countries around the world are toying with the idea of a 4-day work week, Greece is taking a step in the opposite direction. In an effort to boost productivity, the country has introduced 6-day work weeks for some employees. We put Nitu Garcha to work to find out how that might go over here in Canada.
Greece has become the first European country to introduce a 48-hour work week.
I haven't had anyone who's happy about it because the expectation is this
Backlash or set a precedent. Nitu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Brador Lake in Groves Point, Nova Scotia. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Residents of Jamaica are bracing for life-threatening winds and storm surge. As Hurricane Beryl set to make landfall Wednesday afternoon, the now Category 4 storm has left a trail of devastation across the Caribbean, killing at least 6 people. Ahead of the storm's arrival, the Jamaican Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, called for a stronger climate action from wealthier nations.
Hurricane Beryl is the earliest.
As his health ministry says, Israeli attacks have killed at least 28 Palestinians and wounded 125 others in the past 24 hours after Israel's military put 250,000 Palestinians in the city of Khan Yunis under evacuation orders. Among the dead is Dr. Hassan Hamdan, head of the burns and plastic surgery department at Nasser Hospital. He was killed along with his entire family after Israel struck their house in Deir al-Balah. Just hours earlier, the family had followed Israel's evacuation order and fled north. Meanwhile,
Tonight, several developing stories as we come on the air. The pressure mounting on President Biden, as sources say he's keeping an open mind about the future of his campaign. Hurricane Beryl slams Jamaica as a deadly Category 4 and now on a path that could reach Texas. First, all eyes on President Biden. Sources tell ABC News the president has privately acknowledged the next few days will be critical in his campaign, meeting with top Democrats, including the vice president, and tonight with some of the nation's Democratic governors. The White House insists Biden is staying in the race. Selena Wang with late reporting. Our other major headline, Hurricane Beryl slams Jamaica, the already deadly storm, the first major hurricane to hit the island in more than 15 years. We hear from some Americans stuck there, forced to ride out the storm, and Beryl could be a hurricane as it approaches Texas this weekend. Faith Abube from Jamaica, our weather team, timing it all out. Raging wildfires threaten communities in the west. A fast-moving blaze forcing nearly 30,000 from their homes north of Sacramento. More than 1,400 firefighters battling the flames as oppressive heat grips much of the country. 150 million Americans in 22 states under heat alerts. The 4th of July travel rush kicks into high gear with millions on the move. News of a Delta flight forced to divert to JFK. Passengers and crew served spoiled food. Overseas tonight, Israel assassinating one of the highest-ranking Hezbollah commanders in Lebanon, igniting fears of a larger war. Matt Gutman from Tel Aviv. Amid the tensions abroad, law enforcement is on high alert ahead of the July 4th holiday, police putting more officers on patrol than ever before. A tourist from New Zealand killed in what California authorities are calling a robbery gone bad. And America strong tonight, the Civil War heroes who gave their lives to save the Union, finally receiving the country's highest honor.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York,
Tonight, Hurricane Beryl now threatening to hit the U.S. as the monster storm bears down on Jamaica. The deadly Category 4 storm slamming the island with heavy rain and life-threatening storm surge. New images of Beryl's destruction. 90% of homes on one island damaged or destroyed. We're live in Jamaica, our team in the middle of the storm, and we have the new track showing Beryl shifting to potentially impact Texas. The raging wildfire in California, we're on the fire line of this out-of-control blaze. 28,000 orders to evacuate, homes destroyed, and the scorching heat, more than 100 million on alert. Also breaking tonight, President Biden under pressure. The new report that he told a key ally he's weighing whether to stay in the race after his rough debate. Now, another elected Democrat calling on him to drop out. But the president defiant, telling staffers, no one is pushing me out, and the post-debate polls rolling in will show you what they reveal. Plus, the smallest victims of gun violence, the 3-year-old who survived accidentally shooting herself, and the new law that led to her father being charged. The nightmare flight, a Delta plane forced to divert to JFK after passengers were served spoiled food, what the airline says happened as July 4th travel hits record numbers. And play it again, the old piano that's found a new home in the great outdoors.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
In the Nevada's Jeff Bennett is away. On the NewsHour tonight, Hurricane Beryl reaches Jamaica, continuing its deadly path of destruction through the Caribbean. The fallout from President Biden's debate performance continues as calls for him to step aside from inside the Democratic Party grow louder. And we preview the United Kingdom's general. Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz. Jeff Bennett is away. On the NewsHour tonight, Hurricane Beryl reaches Jamaica, continuing its deadly path of destruction through the Caribbean. The fallout from President Biden's debate performance continues as calls for him to step aside from inside the Democratic Party grow louder. And we preview the United Kingdom's general election one day before voters head to the polls.
Something has to be done because it's close to breaking point, I think.
Station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Residents of Jamaica hunkered down today as heavy rains and punishing winds from Hurricane Beryl pounded the island. Power was out across much of the capital, Kingston. The center of the Category 4 storm passed just south of Jamaica this afternoon. At least 6 deaths have been attributed to Beryl since it began its march through the Caribbean earlier this week. New images reveal the extent of
rapidly intensifying.
And as countries in the storm's wake reckon with Beryl's aftermath, weary residents are preparing for a long hurricane season ahead. Back in this country, much of the U.S. will be facing extreme heat over the 4th of July weekend, with heat indexes reaching into the triple digits. We're going to look at that and new rules to protect workers from heat later in the program. In the day's other headlines, Israel's military says it killed a senior Hezbollah commander in southern Lebanon today. The commander was identified as Mohammed Nameh Nasser, who went by the name Abu Nameh. The IDF says he led a unit responsible for shooting rockets into Israel. Cross-border fire between the two sides has ramped up recently, sparking a global diplomatic effort to prevent all-out war. In Israel today, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told a group of soldiers that he's prepared for any possibility.
We are striking Hezbollah very hard every day, and we will also reach a state of full readiness to take any action required in Lebanon, or to reach an arrangement from a position of strength. We prefer an arrangement, but if reality forces us, we will know how to fight.
In the meantime, a settlement tracking group says that Israel has approved the largest seizure of West Bank land in 3 decades. The group, called Peace Now, says the territory in the West Bank amounts to nearly 5 square miles. The current Israeli government considers expansion in the West Bank as legal and legitimate after Israel captured that territory in the 1967 war. Many Palestinians see these expansions as a barrier to any lasting peace. Much of the international community has deemed settlement expansion a violation of international law. Here at home, voters in 2 more states are closer to having abortion measures on the ballot this November. In Arizona, abortion rights advocates say they have more than double the required signatures for a measure that would enshrine abortion rights in the state's constitution. And in Nebraska, activists on both sides of the issue say they've submitted enough signatures for dueling measures, one to protect abortion rights and one to preserve the state's current 12-week ban. 3 other states are trying to add abortion measures to November ballots, while constitutional amendments to enshrine abortion rights are already on the ballot in 6 other states this fall. A U.S. judge has temporarily blocked the Biden administration from enforcing a rule against discrimination in healthcare on the basis of gender identity. The measure was finalized in May and was due to take effect on Friday. But 15 Republican-led states sued, saying it would require their Medicaid programs to pay for treatments and surgeries for transgender people. Tennessee's Attorney General applauded the block, saying that the law is, quote, an attempt to illegally force every healthcare provider in America to adopt the most extreme version of gender ideology. The defense has rested in the bribery and corruption trial of Senator Bob Menendez. His lawyers called several witnesses over 2 days, though the New Jersey Democrat himself did not testify. Menendez has pleaded not guilty to charges that he accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in gold, cash, and gifts in exchange for favors he provided to 3 New Jersey businessmen. Menendez has resisted calls to resign from the Senate. Last month, he filed papers to run for re-election as an independent. The leaders of Russia and China have met for the second time in as many months as Moscow seeks international support for its war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping sat down in Kazakhstan during a meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That follows a trip by Mr. Putin to Beijing in May. A Kremlin spokesperson said the two leaders discussed Ukraine. They agreed that any peace talks without Russia's presence would go nowhere, and they pledged mutual support for one another.
Russian-Chinese relations of comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction are experiencing the best period in their history. Our cooperation is not directed against anyone. We do not create any blocs or alliances. We simply act in the interests of our peoples.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the smoke from Russian missile attacks filled the skies over the eastern city of Dnipro. Officials there say the strikes killed at least 5 civilians and injured 47 others. And Wall Street headed into the July 4th holiday on mixed footing. The Dow Jones Industrial Average ended the day just a fraction lower, but the Nasdaq climbed to yet another record close, adding nearly 160 points. The S&P 500 also closed at a new record. Meanwhile, like father, like son, NBA superstar LeBron James has reportedly agreed to a 2-year, $104 million contract extension with the Los Angeles Lakers, meaning he'll almost certainly get to play with his son, Bronny, who was drafted by the Lakers last week. No father and son duo has ever shared the court in an NBA game. For the elder James, next year will be his 22nd season in the league, tying a record for the most ever. Still to come, on the News Hour, the government releases new rules protecting workers from extreme heat. Why a decades-old lawsuit brought by Gary, Indiana against firearm manufacturers may soon be over. And a look at the heroic work of Ukraine's railroad workers since Russia's invasion.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
In the days following President Joe Biden's poor performance on the debate stage, Democrats have pondered how to approach the future of his re-election campaign. Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Texas was the first sitting Democratic lawmaker to call
Or tonight, that House Committee Oversight Chairman, James Comer, is preparing to bring the White House physician before Congress to possibly answer a few questions. Here now with reaction, Trump 2024 National Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, along with the Monica Crowley podcast host Monica Crowley, and Democratic pollster and former Clinton advisor Doug Schoen. Caroline, let's go to you first. We'd really love to get the input of how Donald Trump sees things, because it's got to be tempting to just tee off, but there's some wisdom in just kind of being quiet about this.
Well, President Trump and our campaign see what the rest of America sees, and that is Joe Biden is not qualified to be president of the United States for another 4 years. He is far too incompetent, he is far too weak, and he is dishonest. And last Thursday exposed the dishonesty, the lies, the corruption of the Democrat Party and also their allies in the mainstream media who have been lying to the American public for the past 4 years about Joe Biden's cognitive decline that we have been calling out, that President Trump has been speaking truth about. But the Biden campaign pointed the finger at us and said we were lying, we were engaging in cheap fakes. There's nothing cheap or fake about Joe Biden's mental state. Not only does our country see it, but the world sees it. Joe Biden is a national security risk. The Democrat Party is in crisis mode. They are collapsing before our eyes. As for our campaign, President Trump just outraised Joe Biden in his campaign and the Democrats. He has all of the momentum in the polls. He's leading Joe Biden by 6 in the latest CNN poll, and he's also leading every other Democrat contender that the chattering class in Washington, D.C. is talking about. He is on his way to victory because this country needs a strong leader, and President Trump is that leader.
So, Doug, there was a critical meeting at the White House. You have these Democratic governors. Only 3 of them came out to the microphone. You would think if they were united, they would have all come out to the microphone to voice their support. But what was your read of that meeting, and how critical is it? I mean, days have passed, and the president really has not addressed the elephant in the room, which is his cognitive decline and his physical ability to actually be the president of the United States.
I see this as another nail in his coffin, plus the Wall Street Journal poll, the New York Times poll, both out today at 6 points for Donald Trump. I think my party, the Democratic Party, their only chance of winning is to have Biden off the ticket and to have an open convention. Kamala Harris, if she gets the nomination, would be a loser too. The only way my party can win is to have a fair, open, transparent nominating process like we haven't seen in many, many years. Do I think it's going to happen? No. Does Biden have to get out? Yes.
Monica, I mean, Doug tackles it right, straight on, which is what we like about Doug. I can't understand why all the Democratic governors didn't come out to the microphone. I'm anxious to hear what they have to say. They sat with him in the room. You're going to voice your support for the president after meeting with him one-on-one and that debate performance. This is on you too, because if you're going to be part of the cover-up, you're going to be part of the denial. Hey, we're going to remember those things.
Well, that's right. And, it looks like now the Democrats are going full Game of Thrones to try to succeed Joe Biden. And that's why you saw with just a handful of governors come out to the sticks after that meeting. You didn't see any of the major governors, right? You didn't see Newsom. You did not see Whitmer. You did not see Pritzker. You did not see Murphy. So any of the key Democrat governors did not come out to the sticks because they're all in competition for his job. Look, there's absolute panic in the Democrat Party now. They're looking at these polls. They're looking at down ticket races as well, being threatened by a huge drag at the top of the ticket. And on top of that, right now we have a national security crisis with an incapacitated president at the top, and it's bleeding now into a constitutional crisis about what to do next. So this is not just limited to the Democrats' drama and who might succeed. Remember, whoever succeeds Joe Biden, if in fact he steps aside, which I'm not so sure he's going to go gently into that good night, but remember the agenda stays the same. This is a far left, catastrophic agenda for the United States, so it really doesn't matter who is at the top of the Democrats' ticket.
In some other news we are tracking, US President Joe Biden is blaming his shaky performance during last week's debate on jet lag. Amid mounting questions over his ability to handle another 4-year term, President Biden told reporters he wasn't very smart for traveling before the debate. But here's the thing. Biden did return from travel on June 15th, nearly 2 weeks before his June 27 debate with former President Trump. The president's remarks are in response to mounting panic from within the Democratic Party over Biden's mental fitness. Meantime, the sentencing for Trump's hush money case has been postponed to mid-September. This delay follows the Supreme Court's partial immunity ruling. Let's now bring in Eric Ham, CTV News political analyst. Good morning, Eric. Thank you for your time.
You bet. Good to be with you.
Let's talk about what we're hearing from the president's camp, saying that the shaky performance was actually because he was jet lagged. Really, is that the best that they could do, looking at the fact the president returned almost 10 days prior to the debate?
Well, not only that, we have to also remember that the president spent much of that time when he returned at Camp David, where we were told that he was in serious debate prep mode for this. And so I think given what we saw at the actual debate, this is all, I think, a sign of desperation as the calls are now beginning to grow louder for the president to actually step down. In fact, we know one Texas congressman has already publicly called for Joe Biden to actually step aside and allow Kamala Harris to actually replace him.
So let's talk about that. Since these calls are growing louder, we understand that President Biden is expected to have a meeting with governors today. It's the first time of sorts he's actually having a meeting of this kind after the debate on Thursday. How do you expect that to really unfold with the pressure mounting on the president?
I think a lot of this is catching the Biden campaign off guard. Remember, Joe Biden, while he had a very horrible debate night, the next day he did a rally where he looked completely different. And then with the recent Supreme Court decision, I think the campaign was thinking that this would no longer be on the table. But what we're continuing to see now are the calls are growing louder. You've got one Texas congressman who is saying that the president needs to step down. You have another congressman from Maine who is saying that Donald Trump is actually going to win the election. And so now as these leaks and drafts begin to grow, what we're seeing now is the president is in damage mode, and this is going to only continue. The question is, how long will this last? Or is the president actually going to make a move to actually get out of the race and allow Kamala Harris to replace him? We don't know the answer to this. We know just a few days ago, the president was saying that he is in this race until the...
France 24, your economy explained. Liberté, égalité, actualité.
I'm Natalie Savrikas, France 24's Athens correspondent. I'll be bringing you the latest from Greece and Cyprus live here on news and other TV programs. So join me here on France 24.
Natalie Savrikas, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Welcome back to Night Watch here on France 24. Our main stories this hour. The fallout continues from Joe Biden's dismal debate performance, but he says he's staying in the race. This despite going down among Democrats that the 81-year-old is up to another 4 years in the White House. The UK is set to vote in general elections, widely expected to see Labour return to government under Keir Starmer after 14 years of Conservative rule. Polls open from 7 a.m. UK time, with the latest polls projecting a record win for Labour. And the French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal urges voters to come together to block the far right in Sunday's second-round snap election. Thousands turned out in central Paris to urge unity against Marine Le Pen's national rally. Good evening to you wherever you're watching. Thanks for joining us here on France 24. First up, US President Joe Biden has insisted he's staying in the race despite growing public doubt among Democrats that he is the right candidate to run for president. This after his disastrous performance in the debate with Donald Trump last week. The New York Times and CNN reported that Biden had acknowledged that his re-election bid was on the line. Next to the Middle East, where Lebanon's Islamist group Hezbollah says it fired more than 100 rockets into Israel in retaliation for a strike that killed another one of its senior commanders. It's the latest in mounting tensions across Israel's northern border. There's been a flurry of diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation amid fears of the Gaza conflict spreading across the region. Charlotte Hughes has this.
A burning car hit in the streets of Tyre in southern Lebanon. It's the aftermath of an Israeli strike on the vehicle, said to have been carrying Mohammed Nasser, one of Hezbollah's top commanders. Hezbollah published a photo of Nasser along with a statement confirming his death. The Israeli military, meanwhile, said it had, quote, eliminated Nasser, accusing him of orchestrating terrorist attacks on Israel.
Nasser entered his position in 2016 and led the rocket and anti-tank missile attacks from southwestern Lebanon towards Israeli civilians, communities, and security forces. He also directed a large number of terrorist attacks towards Israel both during and before the war, and he previously held several central roles within the Hezbollah terrorist organization.
Retaliatory rockets fired from Hezbollah, which claimed to have fired dozens of rockets at Israeli positions on Wednesday.
Israel has approved the largest land seizure in 3 decades in occupied West Bank. Israeli authorities approved the appropriation of the 12.7 square kilometers of land in the Jordan Valley. Data from the tracking group Peace Now indicates it was the largest single appropriation approved since the 1993 Oslo Accords at the start of the peace process. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric called it a step in the wrong direction. To the UK now, where political leaders have made their final push for votes ahead of today's election. Polls open from 7 a.m. UK time in the ballot that's widely expected to see Labour return to government for the first time in 14 years, this time under Keir Starmer. Many voters are dissatisfied with the Tories' handling of a range of issues, including the cost of living, COVID and public services. Let's now head to the town of Boston in Lincolnshire on the UK's east coast. It set the national record for votes in favour of Brexit, with 77% in support. But now residents accuse the Tories of not keeping their promises. So many have turned to the hard-right Reform UK party, led by Nigel Farage. France 24's Hervé Emmerich reports.
The former Conservative mayor of Boston runs this cafe. Born in Morocco, Anton Danny is likely to be running the country and will be expected to keep their campaign promises.
Well, ahead of today's election, let's now take a look at 10 Downing Street, because there have been 5 Tory premiers there over the past years. Of course, the current is Rishi Sunak. But there's been one constant there, which has been Larry the Cat. He was first recruited by David Cameron to hunt mice and was even given an official title, Chief Mouser. And if polls are correct, the aging tabby is now in line for his 6th PM. Well, Larry's X-account recently featured a post saying, "I don't get to vote in the general election, but I do have to live with whoever you elect. No pressure." Well, here in France, Prime Minister Gabriel Attal has urged voters to come together to block the far-right in Sunday's second-round snap election. The outgoing centrist MP said after reigning in the far-left France unbowed in the first round, now it was time to stop Marine Le Pen's anti-immigrant national rally from winning an absolute majority.
The first round eliminated the risk of an absolute majority led by France Unbowed, so the second round must eliminate the risk of an absolute majority led by the National Rally, and that's what's at stake in this election.
Thousands of people rallied in central Paris on Wednesday, calling on voters to join forces to block the National Rally from winning an absolute majority. Despite determination among some, there was also a feeling of dismay among others.
If you look at the international newspapers, it's not normal what's going on. Even they say so. After all, we're the land of freedom. My parents immigrated to France some 30 years ago, and it breaks my heart today. It breaks my heart to think that my parents did everything they could for 30 years to give me a future, and that today I almost feel like a problem in my own country.
I'm quite angry. I feel like we've become a country of racists, and it saddens me a lot, because we're France. I mean, there's a lot of imagination abroad about what France is, and I get the impression we're really closing in on ourselves. It really saddens me. I mean, in 98, 2002, we really came together. I feel like we're a long way from that this time.
Well, the latest poll here in France shows the far right would not win an absolute majority in the National Assembly. Predictions undoubtedly taking into account the more than 200 left and centrist candidates who withdrew from the second round in an effort to block the National Rally. This means the most likely result after Sunday's vote will be a hung parliament. So there's a high chance of a coalition afterwards, but the question is, between whom? Camille Knight takes a look.
With no absolute majority in sight in the French National Assembly, party members are scrambling to find alliances, and analysts are speculating over possible scenarios. There's talk of a plural coalition around Emmanuel Macron. On the left, François Ruffin and Marine Tondelier haven't ruled anything out, whilst on the right, Philippe Juvin or Xavier Bertrand are all in.
It's what I call a provisional government that brings together men and women who are in good faith, who can be open to work on a concrete
The coalition could bring together the left, the centre and the right, but party rivalries could be difficult to overcome.
Fighting the national rally doesn't mean forming an alliance with France and Baud.
France and Baud say they will only join a coalition if they can implement their policies. And for the Greens, the result of the vote means the centre and the right are going to have to compromise.
This hypothetical coalition would be built around the leading Republican force, so the New Popular Front. So it's really up to the others.
On the other side of the spectrum, the far right, who've said they'd only govern in the case of an absolute majority, say they're prepared to work with other Republican Party members.
We'll go to the others and ask them, are you prepared to join us for a new government, for new policies, yes or no? Are you prepared to give us a vote of confidence?
This would be uncharted territory, and with no political legitimacy, it would be close to impossible for the government to implement any sort of reforms.
Finally, 2 astronauts on a mission to test Boeing's Starliner capsule are still stuck on the International Space Station weeks after they were meant to return to Earth. The spacecraft has encountered a series of technical problems. The mission was supposed to show that Boeing's capsules were reliable and capable of taking astronauts to the ISS like SpaceX. Take a look.
Their mission was initially planned for 8 days. But weeks after liftoff, Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams, who were test driving Boeing's newest spacecraft, are yet to return to Earth. The Starliner capsule in which they were travelling has faced a string of problems since it took off on June the 5th. They include several helium leaks and faulty thrusters, which have disrupted the original plans for its return of the astronauts. NASA's Commercial Crew Program Manager has sought to allay concerns over their safety.
I want to make it very clear that Butch and Sonny are not stranded in space. Our plan is to continue to return them on Starliner and return them home at the right time. We'll have a little bit more work to do to get there for the final return, but they're safe on space station. Their spacecraft is working well, and they're enjoying their time on the space station.
This is Starliner's first mission to space-carrying astronauts. Even before this launch, there were issues. During its first test flight 5 years ago, which had nobody on board, Starliner failed to reach its expected orbit. Astronauts were supposed to take off in the capsule last year, but problems with the spacecraft resulted in the launch date being pushed back twice. From aboard the ISS, Wilmore and Williams are to discuss their mission in a news conference during an Earth to Space call on July the 10th.
And that is where we leave it for the moment. Thanks very much for staying with us here on the France 24 Night Watch. See you next time.
Hello and welcome on board. You're watching Eye on Africa and I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Our top stories. Kenya's President Ruto orders a review of MPs' pay rise following a public outcry. People were questioning how the salaries of politicians could be raised during a financial crisis. Human Rights Watch says Ethiopian army attacks healthcare in the country's Amhara region. The NGO accuses Ethiopian security forces of war crimes. And we hear from Tunisian families whose loved ones lost their lives during the Hajj pilgrimage. Kenyan state officials were expecting to get higher salaries, but now President William Ruto says he's ordered a review in that pay rise. His decision comes a week after
The United Nations warned thousands of people could be displaced as Israel ordered Palestinians to flee Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip. The UN further said it was closely monitoring the situation. The warning comes after an Israeli strike Wednesday afternoon hit close to the Nasser hospital, the main center in the Gaza southern city.
Saying that, here we are again at the crossroad where the United Nations and its partner has to reset their operations. We estimate that up to 250,000 people could be affected by this evacuation order, but we are trying to monitor, and it's very difficult for us to be on the ground in all places, trying to monitor the different patterns and be more precise in terms of the number of people that currently are moving.
The Israeli army ordered a mass evacuation of Palestinians from much of Khan Yunis on Monday, a sign that troops are likely to launch a new ground assault in the Gaza Strip's second largest city. Activists leading Kenya's anti-government protests are re-evaluating their approach after Tuesday demonstrations were overshadowed by violence and looting. They worry these incidents could jeopardize the movement's credibility and its efforts to pressure President William Ruto to resign. The activists claim that the violence was instigated by goons hired by politicians to discredit the legitimate protesters or further their own agendas. On social media, some activists have called for the cancellation of the next planned demonstration on Thursday. Interior Minister Kithure Kindiki on Tuesday said criminals were taking advantage of planned protests to commit arson and terrorize Kenyans. He warned that they were planning more violence on Thursday and Sunday and said the government was determined to stop them at whatever cost. Last week, protests were deadly as police opened fire. The 2 weeks of protests have left 39 people dead, according to the Kenya National Human Rights Commission. Ruto on Sunday put that number at 19. Ruto had offered to have dialogue with the Kenyan youth and had promised budget cuts on travel and hospitality for his office in line with some protesters' demands. As unemployment remains high and prices rise, there has been outrage over the luxurious life of the president and other senior government officials. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei stated on Wednesday that a record low turnout in the presidential election did not indicate opposition to the ruling system by non-voters. Over 60% of eligible voters abstained, marking the lowest turnout in the history of the Islamic Republic. Of course, in the first round of the elections, people's participation was not as high as one expects. It was lower than we expected and anticipated. A runoff election will be held on Friday to choose a successor to the late President Ibrahim Raisi, who passed away in a helicopter crash in May. Now, headline former nuclear negotiator Saeed Jalili faces the reformist Masoud Pezeshkian, a heart surgeon who likely needs a widespread turnout to win the presidency. Pezeshkian supporters warn of dark days ahead under Jalil. Meanwhile, many people are unconvinced that their vote even matters.
In a year which will see elections take place in a large number of countries across the world, the United Nations Human Rights Chief has warned against rising hatred and discrimination. Immigration is a key issue in France and Britain, which both go to the polls this week, and in the United States, which holds elections later this year.
I'm always worried when I hear narratives that denigrate the other, that dehumanize the other, that make scapegoats of migrants, of refugees, of asylum seekers, of minority groups. And we need to be very vigilant, because especially history tells us, in particular in Europe, that the vilification of the other, that the denigration of the other is a harbinger for worse to come. And yes, it's an alarm bell that we need to ring.
He called on political leaders to stand up against discrimination, saying there must be zero tolerance for hate speech.
One by one, led by Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Egypt's new cabinet ministers took their oaths before President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Cairo on Wednesday. The new cabinet includes 4 women and several technocrats. It comes 3 months after el-Sisi was sworn in for his 3rd term. Sisi tapped Madbouli to form the new government last month. The new lineup includes major changes, particularly in the defense and economy-related portfolios. Mohamed Maït, the country's finance minister since 2018, was replaced by his deputy Ahmed Kuchuk, a former World Bank economist who played a major role in implementing an IMF-backed reform program. The change comes as the country faces mounting public discontent following years of economic mismanagement, the coronavirus pandemic, and conflict in Europe and the Middle East. General Abdel Majid Saka replaced General Mohamed Zaki as defense minister. Badr Abdelati was named foreign and migration minister, replacing veteran diplomat Sami Shukri.
Four people have been arrested after a security breach at Australia's Parliament House. They are expected to be charged with trespassing offences. 2 different groups were protesting separately on climate change and the war in Gaza. Pro-Palestinian activists scaled the roof of the building, hanging banners across the front and chanting slogans. They were calling for the liberation of the Palestinian territories. The protesters claim Australia's government has enabled war crimes in Gaza. Another sit-in taking place inside the building. Reports say climate activists glued themselves to marble pillars in the foyer, demanding an end to new coal and gas projects. Roger Maynard has more on the breach and how authorities are responding to the protests.
The protest happened about mid-morning local time when 4 pro-Palestinian demonstrators appeared on the roof at the front of the Parliament House. They quickly unfurled banners demanding freedom for Palestine. One banner was hung under the Australian coat of arms above the main entrance to the building with the words, "War crimes enabled here." They were up there for about an hour before police managed to intervene and took the protesters away. Those responsible identified themselves as a group called Renegade Activists. Now, it's not clear whether they were linked to any specific Palestinian organization, but it is nevertheless some major embarrassment for those in charge of security at Parliament House, given that this is one of the most fortified buildings in the country. Getting in is not easy if you don't have a security pass, but those people actually managed to access the roof, which is even harder. To do that, they had to crawl across a glass ceiling, so there will be a lot of questions about how this was allowed to happen. Meanwhile, the unofficial inquest into what happened today has already started, with Australian lawmakers demanding a full inquiry. Liberal Senator James Paterson made the point that tens of millions of dollars had already been spent on protecting Parliament House and that the security mechanisms failed to prevent this morning's demonstration. If protesters could do this, then someone with a violent intent could also do this, he added. And the Nationals MP Barnaby Joyce, a former Deputy Prime Minister, said there were serious questions to answer. He urged the police to go through the organisers like a dose of salts and find out everything about them. Well, for now, the situation at Parliament House is much quieter. It's the final sitting day before the winter break, but the repercussions of such a flagrant breach of security will be felt for days, if not weeks, to come.
The leaders of China and Russia have hailed their partnership and strengthening ties as they work to harden their anti-Western alliance. President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin made the comments on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, or SCO, in Kazakhstan's capital, Astana. Both leaders reaffirmed their strong relationship, describing the SCO as a powerful instrument to advance their foreign policy agendas. They also pledged to continue to strengthen cooperation in world affairs and help bring order to an increasingly chaotic world.
面对变乱交织的国际形势和外部环境，双方要继续。
West Alliance will be speaking to Dr. Bates Gill, Senior Fellow for Asian Security at the National Bureau of Asian Research. That chat happening later this hour at 12:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. The largest artificial intelligence conference in Shanghai is underway as tech rivalry between the US and China heats up. This year's edition of the World Artificial Intelligence Conference is the 7th edition. Chinese enterprises are expected to present innovations that could help the country narrow the gap with the US in terms of technology development. Scientists, entrepreneurs, investors, and stakeholders are gathering to discuss cutting-edge technologies, industry trends, and ethical governance in the field of artificial intelligence. Earlier, Chinese Premier Li Qiang delivered the opening speech where he called AI a great opportunity, but also a great danger. For more, Tan Yuguan joins us live from Shanghai. Yuguan, any major announcements from Premier Li's speech?
There were no major announcements. It was a relatively short speech, about 12 minutes. In it, he basically pointed out that AI has the flow of traffic, causing accidents and even death. Rani?
Thank you for those updates, Yuguan. That was Tan Yuguan reporting live from Shanghai. Your Asia Business Update is next with Henry Yin. A trade battle is brewing between the EU and China.
Well, indeed, Ronnie, so the European Union's new duties on Chinese electric vehicles come into force today, despite some members of the bloc wavering on whether to back the move. And coinciding with the move, Guangzhou-based BYD has charged into Thailand, opening its first plant in Southeast Asia, even as heavy discounts by the company's dealers are now under the scanner.
Today, Northern Territory Police find remains believed to be a 12-year-old girl missing from a remote community. Also ahead, pro-Palestinian protesters arrested after staging a pro-Palestinian demonstration on the roof of Parliament House. Former Liberal staffer Bruce Lemon committed to stand trial on 2 counts of rape in Queensland. And the federal government to spend up to $2 billion on a top-secret data cloud. Welcome to ABC News. I'm Liz Childs. Northern Territory Police say they found human remains believed to be a 12-year-old child missing near the remote community of Palumpa. The child was reportedly attacked by a crocodile in Mango Creek on Tuesday afternoon. An extensive search effort was undertaken, with police confirming remains had been found just before midday today. In a statement, police said it was devastating news for the family, the community, and everyone involved in the search. They also said they're providing support to the family and community, as well as first responders who attended the scene. We'll have more on the story with our reporter in the Territory shortly. Police have arrested pro-Palestinian supporters who scaled the roof of Parliament House in Canberra, causing the temporary closure of the building's front entrance. The protesters unfurled banners which read "No peace on stolen land" and "Palestine will be free." Political reporter Matthew Doran has more from the scene.
All done and dusted here, with those protesters now bundled into the back of police paddy wagons and taken away from Parliament House. They caused quite...
Hurricane Beryl batters Jamaica with life-threatening wind and storm surge.
I am now declaring the whole of Jamaica to be a disaster area.
The deadly, powerful storm ravaging the Caribbean and knocking out power.
So you're stranded?
Yes. Tonight, we are tracking the new path of the hurricane and the devastation it's leaving behind. The CBS Evening News starts now. Good evening, I'm Adriana Diaz in for Nora O'Donnell. We will take you to Jamaica to show you the deadly path of Hurricane Beryl as it roars across the Caribbean. But first, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris met tonight with more than 20 Democratic governors at the White House. The pivotal meeting comes as concern and defections grow within his own party after that disastrous debate performance. But the president tonight is defiant, spending the day talking to campaign staffers, congressional leaders, and radio hosts.
I had a bad night. And the fact of the matter is that, I screwed up. I made a mistake. That's 90 minutes on stage. Look at what I've done in 3.5 years.
CBS's Weijia Jiang reports from the White House on how the president is working to prove he's up to the job for another 4 years.
Tonight, President Biden is trying to squash doubts about his re-election efforts, telling campaign staffers on a call, "Let me say this as clearly as I possibly can and as simply and straightforward as I can. I am running. No one's pushing me out. I'm not leaving." On the campaign trail in Michigan, First Lady Jill Biden stressed the same.
Joe is the Democratic nominee, and he is going to beat Donald Trump.
But today, a second House Democrat called for Biden to step aside. Reportedly, Arizona's Raul Grijalva and Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton said all viable options should be on the table. Now Biden is scrambling.
Breaking tonight, Hurricane Beryl lashes Jamaica and sets its sights on Mexico.
It has been very bad. I mean, very, very bad.
A life-threatening storm pummels the Caribbean. The damage, devastation, and the threat still unfolding. Joe Biden pushes back against multiple reports he's considering bowing out of the race.
It is absolutely false. That's coming directly from him.
And a new warning about toddlers, tantrums, and tablets.
Screens used as a calming strategy becomes a vicious cycle.
Why soothing with screen time could have lasting effects.
From CBC News, this is The National with Asha Tomlinson.
Thanks for joining us. Adrian is away. We begin tonight with Hurricane Beryl and its destructive path through the Caribbean. In Jamaica, people are sheltering.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.